Hi, my name's Charlize, and I'm going to take you through the assessments for culture, diversity, and health. So, for this unit, there's 5 different assessments, and each of those assessments will walk you through just so you've got an understanding of what's expected. So, assessment 1 is a participation mark, and that will generally be marked in the computer lab time. So, when you're doing the work in the computer lab, there'll be a couple of questions at the end of each week, which you're required to answer, and that will form your participation mark for the first assessment. It's worth 10%, and it'll be assessed from weeks 2 to week 11. The second assessment is quite a big assessment in terms of developing a really good understanding of what you're required to do, and it also involves group work. So it also leads into assessment 3, and assessment 3 is a peer review of the presentation. So assessment 2 is the presentation, and assessment 3 is a peer review of the presentation. So the group presentation in week 2 of your tutorial groups, you'll be put into groups for the presentation. This presentation will be worth 30%, and the groups will consist of 5 people within your class, and within that class, ideally, it should be across 5 different disciplines. There can be 2 people of one discipline in a group if that's what's required, but we would prefer the groups to have 5 different disciplines, so it's an interdisciplinary team. And so when you're working together as a group in developing your presentation, it should really help in terms of having a better understanding of the different professions within a team that you will end up working with. And also it will help you have an understanding of how you can still put a health intervention together and meet the needs of particular groups in different professions. So, for example, you could have perhaps 2 health promotion students together, or you can have a mix of recreational therapy, public health, occupational therapy, paramedic, and physiotherapy. Ideally, once again, it would be better to have 5 different professions as an interdisciplinary group. So for this assessment, you're required to address a number of criteria, and these criteria help you to work towards what you're achieving or solving a problem or developing a strategy for a marginalised or a minority group or a minority population in Australia. So, for example, you could talk about a particular group and a particular group of migrants, let's say Zimbabwean skilled migrants, for instance, or you can focus primarily on Indigenous Australians. You could, if you want to be more specific, you could focus on Camellia Roy teenagers. The important thing is that you're as specific as possible in terms of groups that you will be working with or focusing on, and discussing in terms of their health and health outcomes. So for assessment 2, you'll be working on the development of a strategy to support a minority population in Australia. And then as part of that criteria, you'll have to think about how your strategy could be changed in order to support another minority population. So let me explain. You might first focus on an Indigenous population, for instance, and if we use the previous example of the Calamari Roy teenagers to critique your strategy. And then think about how it could be applied to another group. So let's say for instance, Sudanese teenagers. There might be similarities in the minority groups for you to choose. For instance, they're both teenagers, but the population or the ethnic background is different. It needs to be a little bit different. So you and your team will need to have a think about how you need to change the strategy or how you need to adapt the strategy so it can be applicable to the other population group. So this assessment is really important because it gives you the opportunity to learn how other professions and their professional identities in relation to a health issue come together. It also helps you work together as a group to find solutions that capitalize on all the different disciplines that you will be working with in your group. And it's a really important thing to note, because if you can link your professions into the way that you engage in a strategy for the population that's the main focus of your assessment, that will increase the marks that you receive for the assessment. So as we get closer to the assessment submission, we'll give you more and more information in the tutorials, as well as in the lectures, on how to address the criteria, what's the best way for you to do it, so how you might work on some group dynamics, and the best way to explain then the peer assessment is to show you the marking rubric for the peer assessment. And we've actually put this under the assessment tab, but you'll be marking yourself and your group on how much you engage as a group. The feedback is anonymous, so you'll submit it to us and we'll know that you've submitted it. However, that feedback won't be going back to the individual group members, but the group members will get an average mark of what each of the members in the group has graded them. We don't want the teachers to step in and mark it. So we need to really be mindful about critiquing your own work and your group's work and how you've done that. So each person in your group should not have the same mark. There is no way that everyone puts in an equal contribution. You would hope that it does happen, but generally it doesn't happen. And so at the bottom of that form, it also actually has in there some comments for you to give. So why you've possibly given one person a higher mark over someone else. And it's important that your peers will not have access to it. So please be mindful of that. And it should be an accurate reflection on how that group work has gone from your perspective. So it will look at when you're working in groups, and you'll have time in the tutorials to do that. Each of the categories, so there's 5 different categories for the peer review, and each of those categories is out of 2. So for everyone to get full marks, they would end up getting a 10. Once again, we don't think that that's necessarily reasonable that everyone gets the same mark, and it may happen here or there. Generally, as I said, it doesn't really happen, but we would like to see where those extra marks or the lesser marks, the justification, I guess, that's given if one of those marks are above or below what the average marks are that you've given. So as I said, as the tutors, we don't want to have to change or interfere with the marks that you give. And we really want to reinforce that you're accountable to your own grade within the assessment. And that needs to be reflective of the work that you put in and the work that your peers see you putting in. So teamwork is something really important that you'll do outside of uni. It will need to be something that's done as a lifelong skill when you're working across health, across HP. There's constantly teamwork that's required. So it's really important that you start to get some understanding on the dynamics of group work and how to make it as effective as possible for you guys. The fourth assessment is a job application. And in that job application, you'll be required to look at the individual skills that are required, but the questions actually are related to cultural competence. So to get the fuller marks in this assessment, you will need to really, for each question, you should target a different week of content, if you like, that your focus area should be on it. Your answers should be on a different focus area that we've covered across the term for the content of the job application. The fifth assessment is a quiz, and that will be done in the computer lab in week 12. So good luck with the unit. I hope you enjoy it. And if there's any issues, please just let us know. Thank you.